All right. Hi, everyone. I am going to go get my skeleton. Hold on a second. Okay, it's not an anatomy class unless I've got Jack. His name's Jack. Jack Skellington. Let's see my position here. Let me get a little water. All right. So, okay. All right. I think you guys can hear me pretty well. Not much I can do about the echo in the room. However, I've got the mic close by. So this is week 1 of the Learner series talking about anatomy. Pretty much like next to space. This is like my favorite topic. I went to school for anthropology, so I have a degree in anthropology, yeah, it's fascinating stuff, and truly my main goal I have 2 main goals. So from a yoga standpoint, I'm interested in teaching anatomy to yoga students so that you can have an understanding of what your body is doing from the inside out, what your body can do, because maybe now you have a better idea of what it looks like to move your leg and, you know, how the joint works and things like that. You know, having an idea of, oh, this is probably a bone and not a tendon or something like that. So that's one aspect, is from a yoga standpoint, having an idea of how things work just may help you to make a mind-body connection a little bit more. And then my other goal is not really yoga related, just sort of human related, person related. I think, you know, having, so I've worked in healthcare for 19 years now. I worked at an OBGYN for 5 years, and then the last 15 or so years I've been working, oh no, it must be more than that. Anyway, but I've been working with doctors and nurses in the healthcare environment from a technology standpoint, but having worked at the OBGYN was actually enlightening in a kind of depressing way. Working with women, I mean, and even men, but who didn't know, number one, didn't know what certain body parts were, didn't know what certain body parts were called. But then the other part was that they really felt like their body was a mystery that only their doctors could know about. And that to me is, frankly, unacceptable. Having worked with doctors for so long, one thing I can tell you is that, yeah, I mean, no doctor really wants to hear, well, I Googled it, and Google says that I have, I don't know, botulism, whatever. However, having an idea of your body tells your doctor, it does a couple of things. It ups the ante. So if you have a doctor that is hoping that you're ignorant about your body, I'd be wary of that doctor, okay? But if you have a doctor that applauds you for trying to understand your own anatomy, there's a difference between trying to diagnose yourself with WebMD and just knowing what body parts are so that you can say, yeah, this hurts in my, I don't know, my left scapula or just behind my left scapula. Because if you say that I have a pain in my shoulder, oh my God, like your shoulder is this huge area, really. So being specific about where it hurts, what hurts, when it hurts is helpful. And a good doctor will want you to be an informed, active patient. You are active in your own healthcare. And, you know, also, for example, Dr. Heather Bartlett, she is the doctor downstairs. She and I talk about this kind of thing all the time about, you know, it's nice when people actually want to show an interest in their own healthcare instead of just laying all the responsibility on the doctor to get to heal them. But the responsibility is mine to take care of my body. So anyway, so that's sort of like my goal in life. A little bit, I have a lot of goals, but anyway. So the first thing that I want to sort of cover is, and this may be for some of you just really, really basic, and that's fine. But I wanted to talk about some really basic anatomy because from a yoga teacher standpoint, we give a lot of cues related to the body, and sometimes I think that, not patients, students don't know what we're talking about. So I want to talk about some body parts real quick, and I'm going to try to move the mic with me. Okay, I think you can hear me. All right. So first of all, so let's start from the sole of your foot. So when we are standing in mountain pose and your feet are parallel and you've got your hips over your heels, you may not realize how many bones are in your feet. So looking at literally, this is your calcaneus, your heel bone. Your heel bone, and then the pinky toe side of your foot. You've got all these bones that you're working on pressing down, and the ball of your foot is this big knuckle here. So you have the ability with that knuckle bone to really press into the floor. And your hand is a reasonable facsimile of your foot. However, you can see that what would be the palm of your hand is a lot longer. So there's more of a challenge of pressing down the palm of your foot, the sole of your foot, into the floor to sort of create that nice spread and solid foundation. So primarily we're talking about this, like, some teachers call it sort of a triangle, sometimes it's a square. Heel, pinky toe side, ball of the foot, you're hitting these 3 points on the sole of your foot. But I mean, tons of bones in your foot, which means you've got a lot of tendons, ligaments, and muscles also moving all these little bones, okay? So think about that. And one of the things that we try to do in yoga is to strengthen and stretch muscles, tendons, and ligaments. So don't forget about your feet. So if you come to like my yin classes or any of the yin classes, not by anybody really, we work on your feet, sometimes, usually, using tennis balls and so forth. Your feet are the primary thing that you ever have on the ground. And so taking care of your feet, this guy's poor joints never really sit back and stop it, really. Taking care of your feet is crucial. Having good balance feeling equal weight on both feet, strength in your feet, but also flexibility in your feet. Being able to get good range of motion, both with toes curled under, toes flexed, pressing the ball of your foot into the floor, getting a release in the fascia of the soles of your feet, plantar fasciitis. So plantar is the sole of your foot, and fasciitis is the inflammation of the fascia, the muscles in the soles of your feet. A word about that: if your feet hurt when you walk, especially when you wake up in the morning, then I want you to know that I don't want to say that that's not normal. What I want you to know is that that pain doesn't need to be there. You don't have to have that pain. And fixing plantar fasciitis would be one of my suggestions in trying to help yourself fix numerous problems you might feel up your body, okay? Not a doctor, not a physical therapist, not a chiropractor, any of that. However, I have feet and I understand anatomy to a certain extent, of course. I'm not going to do surgery on you. However, personally, I've experienced the pain from plantar fasciitis, which can happen very quickly. You can cause plantar fasciitis in your own feet very quickly. So it's March of 2019 right now. Over the course of winter, there were several weeks where I wore my rain boots that have zero arch support. Because of that, I gave myself excruciating plantar fasciitis, and I felt it into my ankles, my Achilles tendon, my calf muscles. I felt it in my knees and my hips, and that was likely the cause of some of the headaches that I was having as well. That and bad pillows. So working on tennis balls, I can love it. So working on holding a tennis ball in several strategic places down the sole of your foot, holding each spot for about 30 seconds. So you start right behind the heel bone, then you move to the arch, the outside edge, pinky toe side, the center of your foot underneath your knuckle. So you're holding in those places to allow the fascia to release. It's a massage for the soles of your feet. You can have somebody else do this for you. You can go to a massage therapist and have them work on your feet. I recommend trying the tennis ball first, simply because, so I weigh, I don't know, like 140 some, I hope I don't, yeah, about 140 pounds. I'd like to be 135, but anyway. That's that much weight going straight down onto the ball versus the amount of pressure that a massage therapist is going to be able to push into my foot in various places. So I like to try to do this on my own. Plus, so trying to release plantar fasciitis, if you can work with the tennis ball for 2 to 3 times a day, for as long as it takes until the pain goes away. So if you're stepping on a tennis ball right now and it's excruciating, I want you to know that if you give yourself the time to fix it, that pain can go away. So like right now, I'm putting as much weight as I can on my foot, and I just feel like there's a tennis ball there. I'm not joking. So anyway, so that's the soles of your feet. Take care of them, okay? Good shoes, arch support. If you do have plantar fasciitis, if your feet hurt, then for right now, wear shoes that have arch support. Try not to go barefoot. Once you get the pain to go away and the plantar fasciitis is gone, then try to be barefoot a whole lot to get range of motion in your foot. But until you fix your feet, so I wear Birkenstocks that have the arch support in the sole of the foot so that I can be wearing sandals but still have arch support. Flip-flops. Okay. So as far as anatomy and cueing points, the soles of the feet are one thing. Alignment is a whole nother thing. So when you are standing in, just like this skeleton here, okay? First of all, a lot of this skeleton is not what we're shooting for because he's got a kind of scoliosis going on. But you're looking for your center line to be completely lined up. So you've got, this is your hip joint right here is aligned with your knee, and your knee isn't necessarily going down into your heel, but you can see that the line is just going right down into the arch, okay? So this is what you're stacking, and I also want you to see the one thing that's fairly decent on the skeleton here is the situation of the pelvis. Now this is a male skeleton. This is a very narrow pelvis, so that's how I know. The hip flare is a very narrow V. But you can see that these hip bones are really high, okay? So these Mickey Mouse looking ears way up here are really high. And then you've got the hip points right here, okay? And look at this. This is all pouring forward, okay? So what's really good about this skeleton is this lower lordotic curve. You want that, okay? So if you can actually find, so I don't mean to be disgusting, but I have my hand on my tailbone, and right now my tailbone is pointing, for the most part, straight down. That's kind of what you want, okay? You don't want it to be too extreme where you find yourself tipping forward, but you want to have your tailbone kind of pointing down, because if your tailbone is underneath you, then this is pressing your hips forward. This is overstretching your hip flexors in front, and it's putting undue pressure on your lumbar spine. It's pressing your belly out. It's pressing your shoulders back. It's doing a lot of things. It's putting this, it's changing where your center of gravity is, right? Because now my knees are in front of my heels simply because my tailbone is tucked under. So if I lift up through the back to try to get my tailbone to point straight down, that's really like the best indicator. But that's really awkward to actually have people touch their tailbone in class. But that's the best way to feel where your pelvis really should be for a neutral spine. And for a lot of us, that's gonna feel really weird because we're so used to this sort of like lazy thing that we do with our bodies, okay? So see if you can tilt your pelvis forward, and so the next part, let me finish up with alignment. So then your shoulders are over your hips. The crown of the head is over it all. And this, I can't get him to be completely rotated, or not rotated, I should say. However, the crown of the head at the very top of your skull, the way to know what is the crown of your head. So this is one of the body cues that sometimes people miss. So if you put the heel of your hand to, as I say, your unsurprised eyebrows, because if you lift your eyebrows, this is going to screw it up. Relaxed eyebrows, heel of the hand to your eyebrows, and where your middle finger stops. That's pretty much the crown of your head, right? So when you're lifting up through the crown of your head, and you've got your tailbone so that it's pretty much angled to point down, and you're lifting up, then draw your belly button into your spine to really engage transverse abdominis muscles. So these are the muscles that I call your belt. You know, they sort of go from hip bone to hip bone. Standing nice and tall, this is your alignment. And for some people, that's really, really uncomfortable because they've been so lax. And I'm guilty of it too. Like a lot of times I feel myself allowing my pelvis to kick forward, and then that changes everything. It also puts a lot of pressure on my knees. I have sensitive knees because of volleyball. So your alignment is important, and I think it really helps to understand body alignment by seeing your skeleton. Because if you look at another body covered in meat, in muscles and clothing and all of that, it's hard to tell what where the points are that you're really looking for. And I really feel like it's your tailbone. However, sit bones are a really good indicator of things. However, they're so far under, and sometimes there's a lot of meat there. You've got a lot of gluteal muscles and fat, okay? But what I want you to see, number one, it may not be that easy with the camera being so far away, but I feel like he's leaning forward a lot. But, so your sacrum is the back of your pelvis, and your sit bones are technically in the front of your pelvis, all right? And your sit bones create they're these two little loops. They kind of look like, forgive me, Princess Leia, forgive me, Carrie Fisher, but your sit bones kind of look like in Empire Strikes Back, the hanging down look of dog-eared braids that Princess Leia was wearing when Han Solo was put in carbonite. Sorry, I'm a nerd. But anyway, that's kind of what they look like because they have holes in them, okay? They are these little they're these little loop bones. And so they're hanging down, but they're on the front of your pelvis so that, and these loops come up in front to actually make your pubic bone in front. So that when you're sitting on your sit bones, the whole point of your sit bones is to support a seated posture, right? So if you are a bicyclist, if you're a cyclist, then when you're sitting forward, a good bike seat, a good saddle is built to support the pelvic, the pubic bone and the sit bone, the front of the sit bones, okay? And if you're, again, riding a bike is a really good example because I'm trying to think, there's not much other time when you're putting that much pressure and weight on your pubic bone, but when you're riding a bike, an upright bike, your tailbone should not be on the saddle. It should be lifted up, and that means that you're tipping your pelvis forward. So seeing these little indicators on your body is really helpful when you're sitting and you're trying to position your pelvis in such a way that it actually is good for your spine. So let's move up to your lumbar spine again. So I want to come back to your lower lordotic curve. In your lumbar spine, the curve is there, and we want it there when your pelvis is tilted forward, or it's in a, basically this is a neutral position, okay? But for some of us, it feels like it's tilting forward, unnaturally forward. But we want this lower lordotic curve, and let me tell you why. We also want, and this is where the skeleton has to be miserable. The skeleton has headaches, okay? Because this skeleton has no curve in his neck, okay? You want that curve in your neck. So when you have this lower curve and this upper curve, what happens is it turns your spine into like a spring, okay? So that it takes the brunt of the impact and is bouncy and resilient for the most part. This is obviously exaggerating, but that's the idea of a spring. It takes the brunt of the force. When you have a straight spine, because you've tucked your pelvis under, and maybe you've got, like for example, one of the teachers here, Lauren, she had whiplash, and so her neck is completely straight. She's working on it. She's actually getting some curve back in her spine. She's been working with a physical therapist, and that's caused her headaches to have a straight cervical spine. So if you've lost the curves in your spine, your pelvis tilts forward, and your neck, oh my God, with a straight neck, Your chin is into your chest. The other thing that can happen is if you've got extreme tilt in the pelvis, so this posterior tilt, tilting behind you, then you've got your pelvis tipping forward, and maybe, because everything now is so tight, you've now shortened your hamstrings, you've shortened your psoas muscle that comes from your lumbar spine, goes down and around and attaches to the back of the leg. Your psoas pulls your leg back. If all of that is tight because you've shortened the distance between here and here, then that's going to take some time to release that. But what happens when your pelvis presses forward, then your head, if you want to look upright, your head has to lift up like this, right? Now there's another thing that happens is that you've got a pain in your back, okay? So this I kind of call like old man stance. However, I've seen plenty of old people where their back is so bad that they're tilting forward, and this is how they have to look at life. And they probably have a rounded back and they're down like this, right? You've seen those people. It's really sad. So trying to keep this curvature of your spine is crucial for the health of your entire body, right? And so some of that starts with your feet, making sure that your feet are taken care of, because if your feet are comfortable, then you're not going to be protecting, unnecessarily protecting ankles, knees, and hips. Pain in your feet can lead into low back pain and so forth. So anyway, take care of your feet and check out the tilt of your pelvis. Look in the mirror if you need to, right? So one thing that I try to notice is if I can see my hip bones in front, okay? Now, I don't have a big chest, so I have the ability to actually see things down from my chest. And I don't have a big belly either. That's not judgment on anybody that does, it just means that I can see things. So I have to pay attention. However, if I look over here, I can see that my knees and my hips are in front of my ankles, right? So then I know that I need to realign and stand a little bit taller. So sit bones, another cue point that we talk about a lot. Technically, they're in the front of your pelvis. Tailbone, I think we're kind of getting away. Teachers are kind of getting away from using the tailbone as a cue, like lifting your tailbone. The only time I really use tailbone, no, that's not true. I use tailbone a lot, don't I? So in cat-cow, lift your tailbone and your chin, tuck your tailbone. I know what it is. The cue that we're not using anymore, nobody's used or shouldn't be. We shouldn't be using the cue to tuck your tailbone, so we don't want to do that. So what I do use the tailbone for is a cue, pulling the crown of your head away from your tailbone as a way to lengthen your spine, drawing your belly button into your spine, so that's Uddiyana Bandha, is helping to engage and draw these muscles closer to your spine. So those are key points here. I think a lot of times, teachers will use your hip bones, your ilium, sort of Mickey Mouse ears things. I do want to point out here also that not only do you have your psoas that runs down here through your pelvis, but you also have your sciatic nerve. And the challenge that happens with your sciatic nerve is because it all goes through this loop of your sit bones down here, sometimes they get pinched. So if you've got sciatica, it inflames, your sciatic muscle is inflamed, then that's also going to press against the other things that are running through that that area right there. So tipping forward can be a little bit painful. However, with proper positioning of the femur, you may actually find a release from sciatica from forward folds, as well as a tight psoas and so forth. So anyway, few points as far as bandhas, B-A-N-D-H-A. We'll go into a little bit more detail about bandhas, possibly a little bit later in the series. But your pelvic floor muscles. I highly recommend, if you do not know what your pelvic floor muscles look like, whether you're male or female, I highly recommend Googling pelvic floor muscles, okay? You've got several bands of muscles that stretch across the bones at the base of your pelvis. Your pelvic floor muscles are there to, well, for a lot of reasons, but primarily, if you see here, there's a big hole right here. So if you didn't have muscles here, everything would fall out. Now, again, not to be crude, I'm just being anatomically accurate. Females have 2 holes underneath, right? Males have just one, the anus. And so because females have 2 holes down there, all of those muscles are destabilized. So this is why frequently we hear about women needing to do Kegels, the Kegel exercises. So Mula Bandha, this root lock, what you're doing in Mula Bandha is you're engaging your pelvic floor muscles, you're lifting them up, and you're being very specific to engage the perineum, which is the muscle in between the 2 holes, lifting that up. This is also the muscle, for example, like if you had to urinate, and so you started to pee and then you stopped the stream. Or, for example, right now, like if I had to go to the bathroom, but I don't have a bathroom nearby, the muscle that you engage to not wet your pants. However, the challenge with Mula Bandha is to just engage pelvic floor muscles, but not engage your gluteal muscles or your sphincter muscles, right? So very specific lifting of the pelvic floor muscles. So that's Mula Bandha. Uddiyana Bandha, drawing your belly button towards your spine. Sometimes it's cute as coming up under your rib cage. Diaphragmatic breathing. So I think maybe tonight, maybe next week, we're going to talk about breathing, depending on how long it takes me to get up the skeleton here. Your diaphragm is the muscle that attaches down at the very bottom ribs here and holds. Basically, the diaphragm is this muscle flap that separates the air parts from the liquid parts. I'm overgeneralizing, but that's kind of what it does. So when you're doing diaphragmatic breathing, you're allowing the diaphragm to expand so that your lungs can expand. The belly expands so that your guts have someplace to go. On your exhale, your belly comes in, your diaphragm comes up, your lungs press in to the exhale. The basics of diaphragmatic breathing. Your rib cage, your thoracic spine. My thumb's very. Your thoracic spine, every single vertebrae of your thoracic spine has a rib attached to it. So that when you're breathing, your lungs expand and contract. That moves your diaphragm, as we just talked about, but it also moves your rib cage. In between your ribs are the intercostal muscles. So imagine, that's a lot of muscles. Each rib has a muscle in between it, front and back, to help expand and contract. To specifically help with the breathing, also some twisting and things like that. But as you're breathing, you're allowing your ribs to expand and contract, which is then also going to stretch and move your vertebrae and your spine. And that movement is fantastic for your spine, because it's getting that movement in your vertebrae, and that movement in your vertebrae helps to keep movement in your discs, your intervertebral discs, and that keeps them more lubricated. You do not want your discs to dry out. You want them to stay nice and plump and juicy to keep your spine bones from knocking into one another, right? So you want to keep lift in your spine. Twists create wonderful movement for your spine. And if you've never tested this before, if you're brand new to yoga, or if you know somebody who's starting yoga, have them measure themselves, their height. And after like several months, measure them again. I can't tell you how many students I've had, usually they're older women, who have started yoga either because they chose to or the doctor told them to. And they found after a few months that they've actually gained height, like significant, quarter inch, half an inch. One student I think actually gained an inch. And a lot of that is due to, almost all of this is due to, well, one thing would be better posture for sure. But then the other thing is adding the twists and the stretches and the back bends and so forth to your spine, plumps up those discs, makes them nice and juicy, and that adds space in between your spine, in between your vertebrae. But then also the muscles that you're strengthening are helping to keep you a little bit taller, helping to support your spine more, therefore you become taller. I mean, this isn't magic, this isn't woo-woo stuff. Yoga can make you taller. Now, one thing that I do want to point out is the weirdness of your shoulder blades. Okay, so I frequently talk about draw your shoulder blades together behind you. They're really kind of far apart, actually. Now, this guy, he has them screwed to his ribs, so they may actually be able to sit a little bit closer in, but really, and they're not that big. They're these just little tiny, it's kind of like the size of a fillet, I'll be honest. But your shoulder blades just sort of slide on your back, and when you're working on opening up your chest, you're drawing your shoulder blades in the back together. And this helps, so your shoulder blades are connected here to your clavicles, and so when you're moving, you're working on opening up your chest. Your clavicles might not move a whole lot, however, you're stretching these muscles in front. Your pec minor muscles are the ones that are right here in your shoulder joints that really get shortened because of all of our hunching, right? So your shoulder blades, your shoulder joint, tops of the shoulders, okay? So if you say you've got pain in your shoulders, I'm like, where are you talking about, right? Because you've got your shoulder width, you've got the shoulder joints, you've got your rotator cuff muscles, deltoid, your shoulder blades, I consider your shoulders, however, that can also be your upper back. People who have, who sleep poorly, if you sleep on your side, you're rounding your back, overstretching your upper back muscles, you're gonna have a pain behind your shoulder blades sometimes because of overstretched upper back muscles. And it can feel like shoulder pain. Well, kind of because it is, because it's right behind your shoulder blade. So anyway, my point is there are a lot of places that are considered the shoulder. So that's why we're very specific, and I'm talking about these cue points. Tops of the shoulders are these big muscles, your trapezius muscles, that you're really trying to let go of and stretch. And if you haven't gotten a massage in a while, go to a good massage therapist who's really gonna put their thumbs into your trapezius and maybe down into your, oh yeah, and your scalenes. It'll make you cry for your mama right there. So clavicles. So this is your sternoclavicular notch. So if you're practicing, and I can't do it this guy because his head doesn't, or his neck doesn't move, but if you're practicing Jalandhara Bandha, you're bringing your chin way down here into your sternoclavicular notch. Okay, so there's literally, that's what it looks like in that little bowl right there. Your jaw, lower mandible. You've got tons of muscles that are connecting your jaw to your face. You've got ligaments up here as well. There's only one bone that's not attached to anything, and it's your hyoid. It's right here underneath, and that's the thing that keeps your tongue in place. Since I studied forensics, and you guys have probably watched CSI, that's the thing that's usually broken when somebody's strangled, is the hyoid bone. And fun fact, pigs and humans have nearly identical hyoid bones. Pigs have almost like human-like tongues. Anyway, so the muscles that wrap around your skull, the tension headaches can sometimes be caused by bad feet, plantar fasciitis. So other than just paying attention to like stress at work and what you're looking at and things like that, some of the front of the face stuff, pay attention to how your feet feel, how you're holding your body, whether or not your neck is properly aligned, whether or not you are holding tension in the tops of your shoulders, because that can all translate into these tension headaches. These muscles are just pulling on your skull. So we've talked about the crown of the head. Having an understanding of what your face looks like without the muscles on it. You know, I'm used to looking at the skeleton and the body with just layers of muscle, tendon, tissues, things like that. Again, this helps me to understand what I'm trying to accomplish in certain poses. I try sometimes when I'm cueing Shavasana, I tell you to relax your cheek muscles, but also your cheekbones, because there are a lot of muscles that attach here, and by thinking the intention to relax your cheekbone, I mean, obviously you can't relax a bone, but you're relaxing the muscles around your cheekbones. So that's something to think about. And the muscles around your eyes, there's one big muscle that goes around each eye, similar to the muscle that goes around your mouth. But you've got a ton of muscles in your face that make expressions and things like that. So working on the very specific relaxation of your face, I could spend a half an hour working on, like, talking somebody through relaxing their face. Okay, a lot of stuff going on here. So you also have your sinuses. Sinuses are just little holes that are in your skull that sort of allow for pressure to be released. Up here, right over your eyes, you've got sinuses right here under your eyes, in your jaw, all sorts of places. So, so that is, oh, you know, I didn't talk anything about the arms here. When you are properly aligned, let me go back to alignment real quick. Also, you're looking at the alignment down of your arms, and your arms are not going to necessarily go straight down, because a nice relaxed arm, the elbow is drawn back a little bit because of muscles, right? So your arm is not necessarily going to be straight down in line with your legs. However, the natural position of your hands, usually the thumbs are forward. When you rotate your palms, think about everything that is rotating with it. This guy's joints aren't very good for showing that. But think about everything that's rotating when you rotate your hands, right? And so try to start thinking about the entire skeleton. Oh my God, my arm is so tired from holding this microphone. I won't be standing up the whole time, this whole series. But I want you to think about your skeleton as the architecture of your body, the building blocks, the scaffolding of your body, because that's essentially what it is. But knowing that the inside is all bone, okay, and then your tendons and ligaments hold the bone together, and the muscles move the bones. And so when we are working on certain poses for strengthening, stretching, and we'll get into those in this series, is the muscles that are being used in certain poses, and how the pose sort of works. I'm using my left arm a lot to stretch it out. But I want you to think about your body in this way, because it is fascinating, and it is worthwhile to have an understanding, again, so that you're a more informed patient, you're a more informed yoga student. The last thing I want to say, so we're kind of going to wrap up a little bit early, is knowing something about the skeleton now. And if you're fascinated by this, pick up an anatomy book and just flip through. But I want you to know something about your body as it pertains to the skeleton. There's only so much you can do with a pose when it comes to the bones, okay? So when you are rotating your hip, for example, if you're going into pigeon pose, where your right leg is forward, your left leg is back, when it comes to that rotation of the femur in your hip socket, this is the acetabulum. My finger stuck in the acetabulum, that's gross. There's going to come a point when bone is going to hit bone, and you can't go any further. And I want you to know that, because your bones may be built differently than mine. Your bones may be built differently than the person next to you in class. And so you may have bowed legs. You may have pigeon-toed feet. You may have a pelvis that is, you may have a wide pelvis. You may have a tilted pelvis that is literally shaped different. Your femur may be shaped different, arms, and so forth, so that there truly may be, as, oh, his name fell out of my head, one of my favorite yoga anatomy guys who does the yin yoga stuff. I'll think of it later. Anyway, he literally says, like, your bones are getting in the way. You don't have the bones for it, or something like that. So there's only so much you can do when it comes to your skeleton. Stretching your muscles, working in yin poses to stretch tendons and ligaments, that's another thing. However, there's truly a certain point where you can do nothing else because the bones stop you, right? Like this guy right here, this is not realistic. Like you can lift your arm higher than that, but the bone is hitting bone. So for me, that is my arm bone is hitting it. And I know that's true because it's also then lifting my chest and my rib cage. It's as far back as it's gonna go. And if some yoga teacher were to try and pull it back even further, I'm gonna get hurt, and it's just gonna start moving other parts of my body because the bones are trying to follow, okay? So that's something to consider, okay? So that's why I want you to try to drop the idea of maybe what your body should do when you're looking at other people in class or whatever, or you're critiquing yourself on social media, is everybody's bodies are built differently, starting from the inside out, and there's only so much you can do with it, right? And there's only so much you can do with genetics. So that's the basics of the skeleton, of cueing points. We talked a little bit about breath. I'm going to talk a little bit about breath next time as well. And coming up, we're going to talk about different muscles, the anatomy of kneeling and sitting. We're going to talk about drishtis, your core muscles, forward bends. We'll see how far I get into this, because this used to be a series of 11 weeks or 12 weeks. I'm going to try to cram it into 6. So, if you have any comments or questions, feedback, if this was boring as hell, please certainly let me know. If you couldn't hear anything, let me know, or see anything. I'll try to see what I can do about coming closer to the camera. And again, if there's something that you would like me to specifically talk about or address, let me know. I love anatomy, and I could talk about this all day long. I'll be very honest, I don't have a very good memory, so there are some body parts that I don't remember, and I may bring in my anatomy book at times to help me with that. So, thank you. Have a wonderful rest of your evening, and I'll see you in class. Bye, guys.